It is Good Friday for you Catholics, for you Creasters. What is a Creaster, Joe?
Somebody who only goes to church on Christmas and Easter.
Yeah, that's right. You know where I first learned that expression?
Nope.
The man that's going to join us on the phone right now. Father Bryan, did you know that? The first time I ever heard that expression, Creaster, was from you?
I did not.
Yes. Father, I first came across your wonderful teachings and your homilies and the way you brought everybody together over there at St. Joe's in Issaquah. We sent our kids there. Just absolutely loved going to Sunday Mass with you. There you are. And I wanted to have you on. I know you're at St. Stephen's the Martyr and St. Anthony's there over in Renton. I'm sure they are happy to have you. Is that right?
We hope so.
So on Good Friday, I've got a question for you. There's a great piece I saw in 2018 in the Wall Street Journal. It says, for those people that doubt the idea that there was a Jesus, think about it. A couple of ragtag people come out of the Mediterranean, far out near the Mediterranean, and then within 2.5 centuries, Christianity is practiced and celebrated almost all over the world in just 2.5 centuries. And this article goes on to sort of retrace and says something must have happened for those men they must have seen something that changed their life in such a way beyond anything anybody could possibly imagine that they then went out into the world to profess what they had seen and were willing to give up their life for it. So their belief by what they had witnessed was enough to change the world. Is that a pretty good way of summing it up?
It is. It's considered one of the proofs of the resurrection as the witness of the early apostles. They were disciples under Jesus, and after the resurrection, they become apostles who are sent. And when they were with Jesus in his earthly ministry, they followed him and shared meals with him and teaching and healing and all these great works of Jesus. But it wouldn't make sense to any person to think, oh, we're going to preach Jesus risen from the dead to a culture that is persecuting our leader. And there was no motivation for them to do this, no financial fame, status, anything like that, right? They would be resisted by the culture. So they must have encountered the risen Christ, we believe, in such a dramatic way that in a sense, it turned them around from walking away and kind of denying the Lord and being scattered at the crucifixion to come together and to go and proclaim to all nations that Jesus indeed had risen from the dead. It is kind of mind-boggling to even think that the fact that they would do this even to the point of their own death if they hadn't actually encountered the risen Christ. And so there's no other real good justification otherwise. You know, any normal person would say, okay, he was a good guy. Sorry, it didn't work out. And we're on our way.
Yeah, I guess so. Following a line of logic would be, I guess so they understand, they can then understand, okay, so he said he would rise again. So he rises again from the dead. He defeats death. So therefore, the disciples, the apostles would then say, okay, so then I have nothing to fear, right? So death doesn't hold me back. So if Nero or somebody else wants to throw me to the lions, or I'm going to be, crucified upside down or whatever else it is, that's okay because I know there is a life beyond this life. Was that not sort of the general, societal beliefs at that time? Did people just assume, well, you just died and that was the end of you?
Yeah, and it shifted depending on the school of Jewish tradition, how they saw the afterlife. But there was a sense for the apostles that, well, if Jesus rose from the dead, then he can save us as well, right? We can share an eternal life with him because he's conquered the one thing that limits us from relationship and life for all time, which is death itself. And so then, yes, they felt empowered to share this message of the risen Christ. There's also in the New Testament definitely a sense that Jesus would come again.
Yeah.
Quickly. Right? So he's risen from the dead. He appears to the disciples and those gathered in a number of ways that we see in the New Testament, especially in the Gospels. And then we believe he ascends into heaven. And they were looking for him to come back again to wrap up all God's plan of salvation so that everything would be one in the Lord. And so there's definitely a sense of urgency. And also, I would say to a certain degree, protection or a sense of hope or promise of faith.
I see. So as Peter heads out and Matthew and John, as they head out into the world, I guess they think, well, we're, probably just a couple of weeks or months or a year till he comes back again. So we better hurry up and get out there and preach the word, right?
That's right. And
Okay.
so that people are ready to accept the Lord in faith. And then they also have a sense of saying, well, this is urgent news.
Yes.
Right? This isn't just kind of like, well, if we get to it, but no, like he's conquered the thing that is the separator for us all, which is death itself.
I'm speaking with Father Bryan from St. Stephen's and the Martyr and St. Anthony's Catholic Church there in Renton. So, Father, there's so many stories that go into Good Friday and then, of course, Easter Sunday. On Friday, what's one of your favorite stories to preach from or to begin a homily from of all the different things happened?
Sure. Well, on Good Friday, of course, we remember kind of the passion narrative of Jesus. Many people would also know it as the Stations of the Cross. I go different ways depending on the year because it's so rich. There's so many levels to it. But it's that Jesus comes to be we believe, the new and definitive Adam. So it's a replacement of the fall and the sin of the time of creation. Jesus also becomes the new and definitive Moses, the Passover. There's also the context as well of that Jesus becomes the one who gathers all the nations to himself, and because he becomes the entire sacrificial system. The piece that I usually focus the most on Good Friday is how do we deal with suffering and death as human beings? Because my biggest challenge I had when I was in seminary was, okay, I get it, creation, the fall, the covenant, God establishes the people, Jesus comes, his passion, death, resurrection. And then now we're in this in-between time where we believe it's an already but not yet. So God's grace is already with us, but it's not yet brought to completion until Jesus comes again at some point. Which,
the question you're probably asked all the time, well, then if God loves us, why does he let us suffer?
You bet. You bet. And the two answers are, one, I don't know because I'm not God. So I have my own perspective on this. However, we do believe that God is with us in the midst of the suffering. And that's what Jesus' passion shows us, that the suffering can be redeemed, actually, and transformed into new life so that it is not transmitted to others. Yep. So one of the lines in the church is like, pain or suffering that isn't transformed is transmitted. So a lot of what people encounter in their lives are wounds and hurts and sins and all the imperfections of life. And then they start dishing that out to other people.
Oh, I see.
And we see it played out again and again. And so we believe if we unite our sufferings with Christ, our entire lives of faith, then they can actually be transformed into new life where we grow in love, where we can see the promises of the kingdom, where we're able to be free in Jesus.
Let's talk about modern times now. You've been in this business for a long time of saving souls. Have you seen, I saw a piece in the New York Times that there are more young people are now going back to church.
I definitely see church attendance rising. This oftentimes will happen, of course, in societal dynamics. If there's world wars or after 9/11, it could be in the current context of, maybe political instability, some of the wars around the world, or even inflation, right, or cost of living. But I do believe that I see in people where they're looking for, as every generation, looking for meaning and oftentimes returning to the tradition that they grew up in some context as a framework that can provide them with some context, again, on who God is, who we are, what we're called to do, and who we're called to be in this life.
And we are, as organisms, as living creatures, at the level we experience life, I think we have a natural desire to worship, to find something beyond ourselves. Because I think you only need to spend about 15 minutes with yourself to realize, well, there's got to be more than this, right? So I think we're predestined to think some power beyond, something else needs to pull me in a direction that has purpose. So perhaps after spending how many times sort of in the social media desert or wherever else people are just kind of going for whatever it is, alcohol, drugs, whatever, then they say, well, it's still not satisfying. There's still something inside me that has a desire to be quenched. And maybe it is a religion, an organized religion.
Yeah, I mean, St. Augustine said our hearts are restless until they rest in God, because only God is perfect, so only God can perfectly bring us peace. So then other things are good in their own way, right? It doesn't mean, people play sports or watch the Seahawks or whatever. That's fine, right? But it's not going to meet your ultimate fulfillment. When I was doing missionary work in Africa, I remember I talked to somebody and I was saying, I'm from Seattle. There's a lot of atheists and agnostics that live in the area and, people with different backgrounds. And I was talking to a couple of seminarians from Rwanda and Uganda, and they looked at me and they said, what's an atheist? I was like, it's somebody who doesn't believe in God. And they said, there isn't anybody in Africa who doesn't believe in something, right? And it might be some combination of syncretism, but I think it's actually embedded into us to pursue. And this isn't even from faith or religion. This is just simply philosophy and metaphysics. We're built to pursue the transcendentals, which we define this gets into Aristotle and Aquinas, but we define them as unity, truth, and goodness. That each person is designed to strive for perfect unity, truth, and goodness, or beauty or love, And so when we pursue those things, we can see that. We believe the ultimate, of course, is in God, and it's our participation in God that orients us in that way. But that every person that I encounter, whether they go to church or not, they're looking for the same things. And they're looking for unity, right? That we're all one, truth and goodness, and that everything fits where it should, and a sense of joy and happiness. And of course, I'm in organized religion, I'm a priest, that we believe the structure of the religion can provide you with a framework to pursue that in the best way possible. Where on your own, you might do it a little bit, but then it's difficult to build in those disciplines and habits, perhaps, to keep you oriented towards these, we believe, kind of how we're created.
And Billy Graham said once that when we come to the end of ourselves, we come to the beginning of God.
Yeah, and knowing that I'm not the answer to everything. And it especially becomes more apparent to people when things are not going their way.
Yeah.
They don't have control over everything. And our society, rightfully so. I want people to be capable and do good things and be good at their jobs and, take initiative. But it doesn't always build in the way in which we can move towards what St. Ignatius calls holy indifference, which is essentially do the best you can at what you're supposed to do, grow in your vocation, be good at your job, learn, etc., use your gifts, but also don't hold on to it as the source of your identity and your meaning. That your deeper meaning, your deeper meaning of the self is that you're a beloved son or daughter of God, right? You're a beloved child of God. Everything else kind of comes and goes. You currently have this radio show. I'm currently the pastor of this place. Well, all these things are going to change.
Yes.
At some point. So we arrive back at this core identity. And then from that place of holy indifference or freedom, then we can follow the Lord and then be able to respond to all the different blessings and challenges that life sends our way.
To open to it. Father, before we go on a lighter note, Joe was listening while I had my sister on the phone. And I told her I was going to have you on. And she said, well, as long as you get Father Bryan on, why don't you do a quick confession for what you and your brother did to me Easter a long time ago. We were celebrating Good Friday. I think it was 10 or 11, Father. Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. And my brother and I decided that my sister would be the one to be crucified because she had longer hair. So we got two boards out of my Aunt Mary's garage, and we tied her to the board. And because she had longer hair.
That might have been traumatic for her. Luckily, John, there's a difference between mortal and venial sin.
Yes, I think
That's
I'm
probably
gonna-
just a venial sin, so you're okay. Yeah.
Or the venial side. Hey,
You got to
listen,
get into theological distinctions. Yeah.
I'll let you get back to work of saving souls. Father Bryan, thanks so much for being on. Have yourself the happiest of Easters, and continue to do the Lord's work. We appreciate your time. Thank you.